All right. So I'm just going to get started, and we'll go around. I think we're just going to do once around. Everyone can say their piece, and then we can do a little bit of a open floor group discussion.
Sure.
So we'll get started. So welcome back to the Contrarians. We are back at it again. We got another great panel for you. Interesting topic today as well, which is does production matter, or is it all about the performance and music? So we're gonna have some fun views tonight. I'm sure this is a bit of a spicy topic. So we'll get right into it. I do want to apologize. I don't have my microphone and my camera. I'm on the road today, so bear with me. Thank you in advance for your patience. So we're going to go around. Everyone's going to give their thoughts, and then we'll have a bit of a group discussion. So I don't want to delay us any longer. So we're just going to get right in. Martin, I'm going to give you first choice. Do you want to go first or last?
Wow. Okay, I guess I'll go first. I've got a million things going through my head. I guess we should probably stick to maybe 5 minutes each, I suppose, right?
Yeah, about that. That'll
something like that. Okay, so yeah, I find this to be either a really interesting topic or a ludicrous topic. And the way to make it interesting, I think, is not to compare production to performance or lyrics, or how great are the riffs, or how great are the guitar solos. I think you got to just look at it a little more like, how important is production to you, and how much of a make or break is it on certain albums? What is your threshold? It's almost like a gray area thing. So that's one thing, I guess, one way I would look at it. And to add another layer of perspective to it, it also depends a little bit about where are your various stereos. Are you listening on a phone or an iPod Classic in my case? What are your earbuds like? Are they right in your ears? Are they ones that just sit there like those? I don't know why people even use those, like the Apple kind of ones, but mine go right in my ears. My other big stereo listening experience is my car, and actually at my desk while working at my computer. And those are all really, really good stereos. My worst stereos are my actual old school stereos. So playing CDs or vinyl is the worst situation I have. Everything else is the best situation I have. So one of the funny things about production is, possibly there are usually reasons not to even complain about it. Just turn up the dang bass, right? Or turn up the treble, right? Literally, it's like you don't have to have everything on flat all the time. If the production is bothering you, it's a quick fix for you based on turning up your bass or your treble. Having said that, I was actually just thinking about this, annoyed in my car today, actually, where the bass and the treble is so buried under so many menu items to get to that I can't get to it. And there are actually albums in my car that I can't listen to because the bass is way too high, i.e. albums by bass players doing solo albums like Doug Pinnick and Pound Hound, right? And certain King's X albums even. I literally, there are some Doug Pinnick and Pound Hound albums that are so bassy that I can't play them in my car. And then you think of things driving up the highway with the windows down. You need a lot of mid-range in what you're listening to, or you can't hear it. So it can actually be a problem sometimes not having enough bass or mid-range. So having said all this, this question kind of goes all over the place. But if you want my opinion on how important production is super, super important. It is a make or breaker on a lot of albums. I want it to be competent. It can be hard on the ears. Like you can have ear fatigue for various reasons. The loudness wars, or even just, legendary, maybe people know this album or not, but the Ram Jam album, Portrait as a Young Ram, very screechy and mid-rangey, and it's hard on your ears. So yeah, production can be a big problem. I don't understand the connect of comparing it to how important is the songwriting or performance. These are all abstracts. They don't need to be compared to each other. I think the main question is how irritated are you at bad production, and how important is production to you? So there you go to get the ball rolling.
Nice. Wow. Short and sweet. Good points. So for you at home, remember Martin's points now, because we're going to go forward, and then at the end we'll all be discussing as a group. So try and keep those all in your head. So in no particular order, just who's at the top of my Zoom screen here, our special guest, Tyler. Why don't we get you up next?
All right. Well, I don't know about special, but here goes nothing.
Oh, he's special, all right.
In my own way, I guess. So first of all, before I start, I just want to say, of course, me being the new kid on the block, thank you so much, guys, for having me on the Contrarians. And getting that message from Marco this morning, I'm like, shit, yeah, sign me up. I'll go right in. And Martin, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. I've watched you on Banger TV, See a Tranquility.
Thanks, man.
Read the books, yeah. So it's really cool to be on here with all of you guys. I appreciate it. And get ready for a nice, solid, mediocre discussion for me. So
it's a tough question, right? It's a weird question.
Tough. It's tough.
Tyler, give yourself more credit. Come on.
Just being honest here. All right. But anyway, as far as production goes, Martin, everything you said, I echo it, but for me, it really all depends. I've always been the type that says the song speaks for itself. But in all actuality, it really, really depends. I listen to albums where there are great songs, which albums I'll mention, going a little bit forward, but I've listened to so many albums where the songs are great, the songwritings are great, the performances are great, but it's overbloated with, the overproduction, the guitars not sounding like real guitars to the point where the drums don't feel like drums, the snare doesn't sound like a snare at all. So, but I'm a sucker for a nice, dirty, raw production. That's why I'm a huge fan of, say, for instance, the 70s and 80s punk scene. And I'll mention an album quick where I know the production is a hit or miss, and it's definitely not good, but I wouldn't want this particular album to sound pretty. It sounds perfect the way it is. And I'm talking about one of my favorite punk albums of all time, the first Damned album. It doesn't sound pretty, but it's not supposed to sound pretty. You know what I mean? So, you listen to a track like Neat, 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 New Rose, Fan Club, See Her Tonight. Imagine that with maybe a 2010s pop production. I would not want to listen to that record. So at times it's a little flat, but it's a good kind of flat. It's dirty, it's raw. Guitars sound like real guitars. Albums like this, I wouldn't want it to sound pretty. I can say the same thing for maybe the first Ramones record. The performances are there, the vocals are there, everything's there. It's the raw production, the raw energy to those albums is what really makes those albums, if that makes sense. But I can say the same thing, and going towards a whole different spectrum, the infamous 90s grunge movement, right? Louder Than Love. This is one of my favorite Soundgarden records for a reason. Like, Ryan, I know me and you had this discussion before. There you go. There it is. But yeah, Bad Motorfinger is actually my personal favorite, but this is a very close second. And it's for that reason. It doesn't sound pretty. And then I can say the same thing for this grunge classic, Green River.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Yeah. This is one.
Open a window. I'll be right back.
Go for it.
I don't think Green River's ever been mentioned on the Contrarians. My goodness.
New kid on the block. But yeah, Green River. I can say the same thing for Louder Than Love. It's, there's a certain energy to this and a certain focus. And, again, you don't want the sound to sound pretty. And I can say the same thing for the New York Dolls debut. Same thing. And I can go on and on forever. You can argue the first Metallica album. You can argue the Dead Boys, right? So the list can go on and on. You don't want this album to sound pretty or with a more modern day production. They're perfect just the way they are. And with all that being said, there is another spectrum where maybe I would argue starting in the hair metal days where that, in my opinion, sounds more dated than all of that stuff, right? Just because it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like real. It doesn't sound authentic like these. And for that reason, those albums haven't aged well. But one album where it's a perfect example of the songwriting is great, the production's great, and this is I actually do really like this album a lot, but it can get overblown with that overproduction. Now I'm talking about Alice Cooper's Hey Stupid, where I love the title track. Love Is Loaded Gun is one of my favorite ballads from Alice. But you have Wind Up Toy, Might As Well Live 'Em. I can go on and on about this record, but this is a perfect example of the songwriting is great. I think Alice sounds all in all pretty great, but this is probably one of the most dated out of, even if you go back to the Alice Cooper group or his solo records from the 70s and so on and so forth. This album, Trash, Constrictor, even Raise Your Fist and Yell at times, could sound a little dated because it's follows that more of that hair metal type of production to it. So because of that, it sounds dated. And I can say the same thing for, and this is kind of, now this particular band, I jumped off the bandwagon after this album for the reasons I'm about to say, but Pyromania, Def Leppard. I love those first two albums, On Through the Night and High and Dry. And then this is probably the start of, commercial Def Leppard, where you started hearing those pre-Hysteria days, you started hearing a little bit of that so-called McDonald's production, if I should say. but it's still a great album. I'm not saying this is a bad album by any means. Hysterian onwards, forget about it. But this is more of that start to that overproduced, kind of takes away from the album, but the songs are great. And but I can go on and on. Like, for example, this album, Eliminator by ZZ Top, I can say the same exact thing. Or even going towards the 90s with Ozzy's No More Tears. And this album as well, I know this is supposed to be a Tony Iommi solo, but Black Star. And it has probably one of the worst ballads I've ever heard in my life, No Stranger to Love, on here. But it just doesn't sound real. As far as the performances are great, but it just doesn't sound genuine. And I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but those are just the main reasons why those albums sound a little dated. Whereas like the first Dan record that I put out, it sounds like it could have gone out yesterday, just because it's just so authentic. It sounds like, when I put those albums up on my turntable, it sounds like they're sitting right here, right on the stage, and I'm front row, and that's the albums I really go towards. And those albums I just pointed out, I don't go back to as often because of that reason. Not saying those albums are bad. I'm just saying I'm just a sucker for that raw, dirty production. So overall, and I know I was going to rambling a little bit, repeating myself, but overall, it depends. I always go back to more of a raw and dirty sounding record over more of an overproduced commercial record. But that's just about it. That's pretty much my 50 cents.
Great points. Yeah. Excellent points.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I have to remember those. Yeah.
I got one quick question for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that a raw, dirty production, would you even qualify that as bad production, or would you say in its own way, knowing when to get out of the way is still good production? So
on paper, it's shit. This on paper, right? It's at times it does sound a little flat. You want the guitars to be bumped up a little louder, or you want that snare to really ride up. But on the other hand, those albums are perfect for that reason. It's tough. It's really tough for me to explain, but on paper, terrible production. But those are the reasons why I go back to those records. If that make sense at all. But
that makes sense. I think that's thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, let's keep it moving along. Peter, why don't you give us your thoughts?
Oh, okay, great. Nice to see everybody. Full disclosure, this is my topic. So it's a little bit left field and has a lot of branches that this tree could go on. But my initial reason for this is the simple analogy is, can production ruin an album or save an album regardless of what the songs may be? So I look at it this way. There's 4 basic scenarios you can have. You can have an album with questionable songs with bad production. You can have one with good songs with bad production, and then vice versa, bad songs with great production and good songs with good production. So where does that line meet? Where does the songs oversee or circumvent maybe a questionable or bad production, and you go back to it regardless? Even you tell yourself, I don't like how this sounds, there's issues with it, and vice versa. If it sounds really, really great, but if the songs maybe aren't that great, do you go back and revisit it? So it is an exceptionally subjective question, and no two of us are going to view them the same way or what we value the same way. For me personally, production really does make a huge difference. And if it's on the fence and I like the songs, but I have 2 albums where I like the songs on both of them, one has a better production than the other, I may tend to go more towards the one with the better production. Good example is Dream Theater's Images and Words. I love the material on it, but I cannot stand the triggered snare drum that Portnoy has through the whole record. It just drives me nuts.
I agree.
In contrast, you get to Awake, and in the first 5 seconds, as soon as he does the intro drum lick to 6 o'clock, you're like, that's Mike's snare drum. Now it sounds like him, and now I'm really settled into the record, and it is more appealing, it is more pleasing, and it's hard. And you can compare songs back and forth all day and all long. So Martin, you're exactly right on that. You don't want to get in the weeds on that. But if I'm looking at those 2 records, I'm going to Awake more from a production standpoint, regardless if I like the songs better or worse between the 2 records. You look at a lot of bands that start out notoriously low budgets, lesser studios, not as much time, not as much effort. Again, I go back to drums. It's no surprise if people who know me. Those are tending to be the things that sound the weakest on first records. Drums are very complex. They're hard to record well, and they can drag down a mix. The Queensryche EP has great songs. They're all classics, but the sound is not good, in my opinion, and I don't go back to it. I'll listen to live versions later but I won't go back to the EP, even though I love the songs. As they moved along, you get to Rage for Order, Mindcrime, especially Empire. Now you've got the combination of great songs and really strong production, which really elevates those albums in those catalogs. And those are the ones that I go to. So I am curious, as we look at the most popular records, is there some semblance of production quality that is inherently boosting that popularity, even if the listener isn't aware of it or doesn't know how to articulate it, challenge it, question it? And Martin, you pointed out another great thing. What people are listening on to today does matter. It is substantial. We're not in those days where people had standalone stereo systems where you and your buddies sat down on the floor, popped the turntable on, and off you went. That doesn't happen. It's phones, it's electronics, it doesn't outside of our circle there, Grant, sorry.
Oh, I thought maybe something was wrong with me.
No, you're all right. I'm in the
Okay.
we're in the same boat. But for the majority, sonics don't seem to matter very much. Low quality, compressed digital files, they're just going for the song. The song is what matters. Because in the end, are you a critical listener or are you not a critical listener? If you are, then production really, really matters. If you aren't, it's all about the song. And if the song connects to you, they're not going, wow, that drum's got a lot of depth to it. They're just not. It's just not something they're interested in. But what is interesting is, and this ties into a conversation we just had the other day, what is the trend? Remix, remaster, remix, remaster, remix, remaster. The songs aren't changing. It's the sonics. At least that's the implication. So I like to see how that weighs out, because the song in that case stays consistent. It's the sonics that are changing. And are they gravitating and grabbing these because they've been told or they have been sold the goods that they sound better? So therefore I have to get them. It's not a small trend. It happens in every catalog now, especially with older artists. The remix, remaster is the big, huge thing. So it is interesting from that standpoint. There is no right or wrong answer to this. And I think it really just makes us question ourselves. What do we listen for? Why are we listening to it? Why does it connect to us? Look, you may not like When the Levee Breaks as an example, but you can go, holy smokes, those drums sound amazing. And I can listen to that track, even if I really don't care for the song. Maybe you don't repeat it and go back to it. So maybe I just answered my own question. But I think it's an interesting premise that, because I think the greatest albums that people revere are not isolated as having just great songs or great songwriting. They do have a coupling with great production and great sound and great sonics. As brilliant as every song is on Pet Sounds, and they are all amazing, it's production of it and how it came out and how it changed the industry and how it obviously influenced everybody from the Beatles and everybody after that. So sonics did matter, and it did influence and impact how people recorded, listened, and enjoyed music. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just an inquiry, a question, and it makes us say, hey, what matters the most to us as a listener?
Nice.
Yeah, awesome. And
Can't
great.
argue
great
with any of that.
No.
Yeah, I think I don't care what anyone else says. This is an interesting topic, and it's one that's ripe for discussion. So thanks, Peter.
Welcome.
All right,
Absolutely.
let's take a trip down to the Rock Warehouse and visit
Goodness.
Mr. Grant.
How do I follow up Peter, for crying out loud?
Stop it.
Well, now all right, I'll give it a shot.
I'll give you $5 later. Stop.
No, I'm being honest.
Oh, thank you.
I
That's
agree
kind.
with that 100%.
Yeah.
But we do have to consider this. There's a lot to this. Like
Mhm.
Martin said, when we're talking about Doug's bass, when it's jacked up in the, when he's listening to it and he gets a lot of bass, is that the mastering engineer's fault? Is that the mixing engineer's fault? Is that the producer's fault? That might be mastering that, and that could be something else totally. I don't know. You'd have to hear a remastered version of it. So, I mean, there are different aspects of this. Everything has to work together to make something work perfectly. Let me give you an example of a record with bad production, but everybody loves it. Kiss, Hotter Than Hell.
There you go.
Look at
Absolutely.
everybody's top 10 lists of Kiss. Look at Pete Pardo. Let's use him as an example. Loves Hotter Than Hell. Does Hotter Than Hell sound good? No, it sounds really like shit, but there's something about it. There's something magical about that crappy production, something magical about it that Tyler likes, right? There's something about it. And you have to admit the songs on Hotter Than Hell are some of the best Kiss songs that Kiss ever did. I'll go on record. We might get hate mail like Reed would get, but maybe not. But Hotter Than Hell sounds like crap, but there's something about that production that lends I don't know. There's something magical about it. I don't know. When I was a kid and I heard Hotter Than Hell, I thought it was horrible. There are other records that suffer terribly from production. I'm going to give you an example. Rush Vapor Trails. Paul Northfield should be in prison for what he did to Vapor Trails. All that was because they were running everything so hot. I don't know if he was like strung out on some kind of drug or something, or his headphones were broken, but Vapor Trails is absolutely horrid. I know they put it back out remixed. It's still horrible. There are songs on that record somewhere, but I can't listen to it. It's a horrible mess, and it should never have been. What were Getty and Alex doing when they were listening back to their takes? I don't know what happened, because that's not mastering. That's not Howie Weinberg. That's Paul Northfield messing everything up. So they've ruined that record for me, even though I saw them on that tour and it's quite good. Another one.
I'm sorry, Grant.
Go ahead.
Did you hear the remixed version?
Yeah, but it sucks still.
You still don't like it?
This was
I
all in
like
the
it.
recording.
I
of
like
it.
it too.
Of course you
I
do.
like it.
You're young. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is Vapor Trails could have been a lot better than what it was. Of course, it's in that era where everything's all jacked up. We've got loudness wars. You'd be lucky to go out and find anything that really is worthwhile. Another one that I'm going to bring out is REM Around the Sun, because that is another example of something that probably has songs on it that are worthwhile, but you can't get past the production. But these are more modern things. That's 1996. Let's even go back even further. Let's go back to Cheap Trick, Standing on the Edge. Now, the whole idea for Standing on the Edge was Jack Douglas was going to come back in and we were going to produce a Cheap Trick album like they used to. Now, if you've listened to Standing on the Edge, there's a lot of great material on that record. The problem is old Jack was having trouble with Yoko. So he got pulled out of the mixing process. So he never got to finish it. They brought in Tony Platt. Now, if you guys know Tony Platt, and if you've heard Cheap Trick the Doctor, you know his work. It is absolutely, I'm sorry if I'm ragging. I'm starting to sound like Peter and Reed. It's absolutely hideous what Tony Platt did to Standing on the Edge. Let's give me the song, Little Sister, great Cheap Trick song. You give it the standard Jack Douglas production and it sounds great. This CD, what is this? The Epic Archive Volume 3 has 2 Standing on the Edge tracks that has the original Jack Douglas mix. You don't even recognize these from what's on this. I'm telling you, there's a good record on Standing on the Edge, but it's the production and what Tony Platt did to it. I know it's something of the time period, but Little Sister sounds nothing like what it does on Standing on the Edge. So I really can't listen to Standing on the Edge, but I will have to admit, Tonight It's You is still a great song. Maybe some of the songs on here aren't so great, but I think there's a great Cheap Trick album here somewhere. So what I'm trying to say, I think there's a lot that goes into this. It's part recording engineer, mixing engineer, which has a lot to do with it. I've mentioned this before in the past, like Nirvana Nevermind. When Kurt Cobain heard who mixed it? Andy Wallace. What he did that, he didn't even recognize the same record. I mean, Kurt Cobain wanted something raw, rock and hard, and Andy Wallace turned out this pop sheen to it to some degree. So I don't think Kurt Cobain ever liked Nevermind. He thought it was
Kurt Cobain always hated that record because
it was too.
Yeah,
it's not what he wanted,
right.
But I think what I'm trying to say, it's a perfect storm. You've got to have good engineering, good mastering, good mixing, and good songs. But yeah, you can have stuff that have crappy production, but those songs are so good. I mean, like Hotter Than Hell, some of those tracks are great and it just sounds terrible, but we can listen past it. I really don't know what I'm trying to say, but you kind of get what I'm trying to say. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
again, many good points. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of, this is similar to the last episode that I hosted, where everyone's sort of saying a similar thing, just on slightly different, ends of the of that spectrum. But no, that's great. Thanks, Grant.
Thank you.
Let's just keep going straight ahead. Ryan, why don't you let us know what you think?
All right, thank you. So short answer to start off, I do think production is important, but it isn't a deal breaker. I think that if an album has production that doesn't fit the context of what the album it is, it automatically knocks the album down a couple points just because it failed in one aspect. But that doesn't mean that it has to ruin the album for you, because if there are songs that you really like, you can maybe look past the production. But I also think that really good production can bring an album up a few points, or it can make it even more legendary of an album because it sounds so good. I mean, if Dark Side of the Moon wasn't one of the greatest sounding records ever recorded, would it be talked about nearly as much as it is? No.
True.
If Steely Dan's Asia wasn't one of the best recorded albums of their time, would it still be talked about? Probably not as much as it is. Like, those albums were brought up by their production, and they have great songs on them too. But if it was mediocre production that's dated now with really good songs, it maybe still be talked about, but Dark Side of the Moon might get about the same recognition as Obscured by Clouds, because I think Obscured by Clouds has really fantastic songs, but it doesn't sound quite as good. So I think that's one thing we have to put in the context. But I think that production is a very big idea because there is context. Like, if I'm listening to Black Flag, I don't want to hear them sound clean and tame. And that's why some of my favorite stuff I've heard by a band like Black Flag is their live stuff, even bootlegs. Like, yeah, it sounds absolutely terrible, but it makes me feel like I'm actually at a hardcore concert, and it's so much more aggressive at that point. Like, I love Black Flag studio albums, but I always preferred the live stuff just because it does sound a lot rawer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And actually just, in general it does. But I think of albums where I don't really like the production, but I still really love the albums. I don't think Purple Rain's one of the best sounding albums ever made. And actually, I think that Prince has much better sounding records, although I don't think production was ever Prince's strong suit. No. But at the same time, his songwriting was so good and he was so inventive that I still do really like a lot of his content, even though production was never the strong suit. I actually think some of my favorite sounding records by him is like the early stuff, like Dirty Mind, when it really was just really stripped down, because I don't know, it fit the context of what that music was at the time. I think Purple Rain's a very thin sounding record. I think there's a lot of really interesting arrangements though, and they definitely bring up that sound, and the songwriting in general is just fantastic. You mentioned Hotter Than Hell, Grant. Yeah, it's not the best produced album ever, but it is my favorite Kiss album, because the songwriting is so good. And I actually don't entirely mind the production. Like, it's not good, but I almost feel like it fits the rawness and the heaviness of that album. So I don't think it's a complete failure. It works for what it was at the time. Pump by Aerosmith. I don't like all the production choices. I don't like the drum sound, but the songwriting is fantastic, and I still love the album because of it. So it's like, I don't know. I think, but at the same time, other than the Kiss example, because Purple Rain's not my favorite Prince album, and Pump is not my favorite Aerosmith album, I think if those albums had better production, they could even rank higher in my list for those bands. Like Purple Rain could be my favorite Prince album if it sounded a little bit more, a little bit better. Like if it had like a bit more bass in it, a bit more depth in the sound, yeah, it could be like an even better Prince album for me, even though I
So
still
on
love
the
it.
Prince record, though, is it mastering or is it the engineering of it? What you are describing to me sounds like a bad mastering job.
I think it's more than that. I think it is the production too, honestly. I think it's a mix of a lot of things with that album, but I don't know. It's a very dated sounding album in general, but it's still a fantastic album. So I think that that's a thing. Or all right, so for example, Martin, you kind of brought up different listening to things on different medium or media. So like listening in your car, listening on vinyl, listening on your phone, etc. An album where I was really off put by the production, listening to it on a different format, was Pawn Hearts by Vandergraaf Generator. So listening into in my car with the bass pumped up and stuff, it sounded pretty good. Listening to it on vinyl, I was just like, is this the same album? It sounds absolutely terrible. Like an original US pressing of the album, like no drums, they sound like cardboard boxes. The organs sound super thin, the guitars sound super thin, everything just sounds like a mess. I turned it off and sold my copy of that record and just started listening to it on my phone again, because I think it's an amazing album, but it sounded so bad on vinyl. I don't know if they remastered it or remixed it or whatever to have for my phone, but it sounded so much better. So, you know, I like to look at productions based off of the original way the album came out, because I mean, that was the way it came out for people to hear it. And for that one, it's like, yeah, there's some real issues. And I hear that with a lot of prog albums of that time, but I still love prog, even though a lot of that stuff's not the best sounding. So overall, I think that, yes, it's important when there's bad production, and not bad in the sense that it could be rough or raw, because I think sometimes that fits an album. I think that's sometimes what makes the album work. But if there's bad production, a lot of the time it will knock an album down a couple points. And if there's really good production, it can knock it up a few points. So yes, production is important, but it's not a deal breaker. And I don't think it can also, I also don't think it can completely save an album that has really bad songs either. So yeah.
All right.
If I could just say one thing, because Ryan did bring up something that I wanted to say. You brought up Pump. And Grant, Peter, Ryan, we've had this discussion multiple times. Imagine Pump with a Draw the Line production or a Rocks production. It could be arguably one of Aerosmith's greatest albums of all time, if you were to ask me, at least. Because a lot of like how these songs are written, how they're kind of, how the performances are, put that with the Draw the Line production or the Night in the Rust production, it could be shit. It could be number one.
Tyler, sign me up for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We only could.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I would. I would pay to hear that.
Yeah.
Too bad we
here's
don't
the-
have a time machine or anything.
Just for the record, what we all don't like about the Pump production is the brashness of the cymbals, right? And the hi-hat, and just the constant shove it whole thing.
Yeah.
And the bottom end is not great. It's just noisy, right?
It's a very noisy production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible.
But I still love the album. I think it's a great album.
It's great. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they take away Joey Kramer's cymbals and don't let him hit any cymbals at all. And it's just on all the rest of it.
Martin, don't say that in front of Peter, for crying out loud. You're going to start something that we won't be able to stop.
Let's hold this thought. We'll keep this as we're going to have a great end of show discussion. But just so that we make sure everyone gets their time, Nick, why don't we get you to give your opinion? And I'm actually going to do a short 5-minute one as well after, and then we'll just dive in and we'll have a nice solid round table. We can all yell at each other. It'll be great. But until then,
Perfect.
Nick, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Heading into this, I was going to say that only the performance / the song matters. And I was going to vociferously give examples about how, I listen to music on a Victrola. I'll listen to music on this shitty phone. I'll listen to music on crappy computer speakers most often, because that's where I am. And it's a luxury to hear music in a car. It's probably the best I can hope for nowadays. And I'd probably cite examples that, and I've heard it from other contrarians, some of us may listen to Robert Johnson and Skip James and Elmore James and anybody named James and Little Richard and Bo Diddley and Eddie Cochran. And it's all about the performance because the production was so primitive. It's all about the guitar or the vocal especially, and then heading up through the Stones and of course, it doesn't get mentioned a lot on Contrarians, but I'm a huge fan of live music, truly live music. So whether it's Sam Cooke at the Harlem Square Club or Rory Gallagher's many live albums or Humble Pie, for me, I love live music. So it's the performance. But I started thinking about it, and Peter mentioned, Pet Sounds, and you think of Sgt. Pepper's. With technology, production became important. It became something to think about and something to factor in. And for me, although the ideal is the performance, the ideal is the what we're hearing, and I have a lot of tolerance for what we've been describing as bad production. For me, a little different than what Peter was talking about, subjective. I'm the person who actually has a reaction to shit production nowadays with the loudness wars and the overcompression and hearing a hi-hat or a tambourine that's like crushing my head. And I literally will get a headache, a sinus headache. So anything that's remastered or new production, I almost can't hang in there. Now I describe it as digital fatigue. I know it's not the ear fatigue is what Martin described it as, but if you A/B like a remastered Journey's Greatest Hits with the old style, there's no difference. It sounds ridiculous, the loud stuff. So that's why I don't listen to a lot of new music, because for some reason, whether it's a generational thing or whatever, I cannot hang in with that music. It is off-putting to me. And one other aspect, I know Martin's defined the production as sort of the sonics and the technical aspect. There's also that other side too, maybe I'll be the contrarian here, the side of production where it's part of that creative process, whether it's producer as part of the songwriting, part of helping craft a bridge, that sort of thing, not just the sonics. And from the Beatles and the Beach Boys, would God Only Knows sound as good if it weren't for the production? If Bob Ezrin wasn't involved with Alice Cooper and Kiss and Pink Floyd and Deep Purple, would it sound the same? So I do acknowledge that part of production. I do acknowledge that could be a part of it. My ideal is the performance. My ideal is that even if it's lousy, what are they trying to convey? What is the vocal like? The sentiment of the song? But production does creep in for me, and it creeps in, not only just that objective way where I have a physical reaction to it, but also in that other sense, or the other side of it, besides the sonics part of it, the creative part of it. So I'm decidedly in the performance camp, but I acknowledge the production. And I wish that in modern production with technology, I wish they would give an old fogey style presentation of an album, and then they could have the overcompressed loudness war garbage for everybody else and have 2 releases and see how they do.
Hey, that's a good idea there.
Why not?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's a short and sweet, but nice. We finally got someone on the other end swinging over the fences, so that's great. I'm going to be really quick with mine. Essentially, I think it comes down to this. Production is, to me, a scale of how well you can reveal the full potential of that song. A bad mix can damage a song. It can take it down. Bad sonics can certainly bring something down. But if that song is truly great, if that performance is truly great, a little bit of that will always shine through. Now, the better you get, the more you can reveal. But there is a point where the mix can do harm. that extra bit of production, that overproduction can do harm. And it's, if you picture it as a good example is like say a soft drink, like let's say Coke, right? Some people are going to prefer Coke in a can. Some people are going to prefer Coke in a glass bottle. Some people are going to prefer Coke in a glass. But if you take that can of Coke, open it up, pour it into one, pour it into another, it loses some of that fizz, some of that energy. And that's sort of similar with a song. If you start overproducing it, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, you can make the song more about that producer trying to show off their chops and their understanding of the technology, and you can lose something. Now, on the other hand, as Nick sort of pointed out and alluded to, sometimes production is part of that creative process. Sometimes a producer is going to say, I want the background vocalists to be doing some oohs and ahs in the background. They're adding something to the song that was not there before, and maybe that gives it that pop, that energy. But if we go right down the middle, good production can help a song sound better, but is never going to make that song itself actually better. Bad production will take away from that song, but it's never really going to completely destroy it. And just one little contrarian point, I think that good sonics doesn't necessarily mean good production. There are punk albums out there that you want it to sound rough and raw, and to me that's good production. That is a producer getting out of the way and saying there is an energy and there is a story, there is a message I'm trying to get across, and perfectly tracked, perfectly mixed. That ain't it, right? We're trying to say we're four poor guys from down here and we're just going to come and kick your ass. That's not this. You don't want that to sound like like a pop record. That's welcome. Come here. I have a nice song for you. That's a totally different energy. And knowing when that is appropriate, that's part of good production to me. Anyways, that was just my little spiel because this is a really fun topic and I wanted to be part of it. But enough of that. Let's open up the floor for discussion. Anyone have anything burning that they really want to get out there and hear what everyone else to say, or say something else? I see Peter, your hand's going. You're up.
Well, yeah, let me narrow this down to something much more focusable and much more practical. We've all been to live shows, and anybody who goes to a live show, you leave the show, two things: the sound was good or the sound ruined the show. You say, well, you say it's a good set list or whatever, but you kind of know that going in if you have any sense of what's going on. But believe me, we've all been there. We leave, and if the sound is horrible, it has ruined the concert. You just go, it was a mess. It hurts. My ears were buzzing. I couldn't hear anything. It was muddy. I couldn't hear the vocals. And a good sound, you leave even more excited and more thrilled about what you just experienced. That's a small microcosm, and it happens instantly. Albums last over a lifetime, and it's not as often thought of in the same kind of context, but they do have a similar kind of approach. I had a friend who had a really super high-end audio system, and he had put it into his house, and he asked me to come over, and he said, well, let's listen to some stuff on it. And first thing he popped in was the first generation Crimes of Passion, Chrysalis from Pat Benatar, and he's like, oh my God, why does this system sound horrible? Garbage in, garbage out. The better his system was, it's just like with HD TVs and all these advanced 4Ks, whatever, the lower quality goes into the higher resolution, it exposes everything, it neutralizes its sonics, and it is like having your pants pulled down in public. It is exposing, it is uncomfortable. And he's like, why doesn't this sound any good? Well, okay, hold on. Put in a mobile fidelity ultra disc of Asia, Ryan. All of a sudden, his system screams to life. And he's like, oh my gosh, now it sounds great. Well, what's different? Well, the productions and the quality of what's in it. So those do make a difference. And again, it's going to depend on the people's level. That's a high-end example. But the lower end, maybe they don't see it that way. But, Martin, any of us who have ever done a Contrarians or reviews on our own, we talk about the songs, we talk about how the songs move us. We always mention its production. What did it do? What did it sound like? Oh, I like this one maybe a little bit better than the other one. You know, there's the rising versus long lives. Oh, I like the sound maybe better on one or the other. I'm not going to pick. We won't get into the argument on that. But you have a preference. Mob Rules versus Heaven and Hell. Holy Diver versus Last in Line. Sonics play a part of those conversations when you compare them. So again, while we may not enumerate it vocally a lot of times, it's there. And I think it's a part of the entire picture that makes up a presentation of a piece of art. And you can't separate one from the other and just say, well, this doesn't matter or that doesn't matter, because clearly they all matter in conjunction. And the elite stuff is when we've got brilliance here, they meet here, and then we've got something spectacular. That's just.
I want to make a quick point that leads off of that, just about Hotter Than Hell. 2 quick points about Hotter Than Hell. So yes, I mean, the interesting thing is you've got something to talk about with Hotter Than Hell, and it's a different production from all the other ones. If the first 3 Kiss albums were all produced like, say, Dressed to Kill, which is sort of the most correct, pristine, trebly highest high fidelity, if all those songs across those 3 albums were produced the same, we'd probably forget some of the interest that we have in those Hotter Than Hell songs, because they'd all just meld into one. So that's interesting. I think you get that with Zeppelin a little bit as well, and you can talk about all the different ways that Metallica produced their records. It just gives you something to talk about, and it distinguishes the albums between each other. The last point is, I listen to Hotter Than Hell sometimes, and I think because I'm not a big bootleg guy, but when I listen to a bootleg, you put on a bootleg and you can't even get your bearings. You're dizzy. You don't know what's going on. It sounds terrible, but you listen to a couple of verses and a chorus and maybe the next song, and soon you're accustomed to it and your brain sorts out what's going on. Hotter Than Hell's a little bit like that. You forget after a song and a half what good production was supposed to sound like, and you just start enjoying the songs.
Perfect point. Absolutely perfect. Dead on.
Anybody else want to add on to
Well,
that?
the only one I want to add for is Nick, because Nick was comparing a lot of those 1950s, saying that they don't sound all that great. Well, don't forget, in the 50s, everything was pretty simple. You should look at the original. What was the Steve Hoffman, Buddy Holly CD he did like at 87 from the original master tapes? Nick, I recommend you to go hear that record or that CD. It sounds absolutely stunning.
Oh,
it has to be like one of the best sounding CDs there is.
Which is great, which enhances the music, but use Buddy Holly as an example.
Well,
Buddy
I'm just
Holly,
saying he's from the 50s.
Right, but Buddy Holly in its primitive form is fantastic. So by today's standards, production-wise, it's garbage. But for me,
it depends on what road you're traveling.
But again, for me, it's all about that performance. I
mean,
care
the
less
audio files take that. That's like one of the holy grails.
What?
Yeah.
What is?
From the original master tapes, Buddy Holly, the sound of it through a really good system, not some shitty system.
Right.
But a really good system. It's like Buddy's right there. It's amazing.
But the essence of Buddy Holly's in the performance. We're not listening to Buddy Holly to say, oh, I can hear every little nuance of the upright bass or his strat. That's not why we're listening to Buddy Holly.
Right. But Martin's point is echoed here exactly. Because back then there weren't huge contrasts between Sun and here and Stax and Motown. They all produced well. They were different, but they all produced well. So your ear wasn't jarred going from one place to the next like you are now. The range of production now is wildly larger. So if you went from Little Richard to Jerry Lee they were all good.
But give me then that narrow band any day over the technology that we have nowadays in the modern production. It's shit.
Don't forget they're mixing way less instruments too, right?
Absolutely.
It's three or four things they're dealing with. Right?
Again, it's the performance. Give me a guy with a guitar or a piano, and I'll take that any day over some elaborate production with some.
In this case, Nick, the production takes care of itself. You're not thinking about it. You're not analyzing it. You can, at that point, have the luxury to just simply enjoy it for the art, for the song, for the lyric, for the content.
And
I'm
no
not
one-
disagreeing with you that that is a lost art. And that is someplace that I would prefer we get back to. But from that standpoint, you took that for granted, whether you think so or not.
No one listens to Bo Diddley for the production. That's
Yes.
the point.
Yes.
No one listens to that for it's the energy. It's what was captured. It's his voice. It's his guitar. Who gives
So
a
is the
rip
bigger
about
question, at what point, when did production start to interfere?
Pet Sounds and Sgt. Pepper's when it became important. That's the mark right there. And I agree, and I've said it is for modern music, it is a factor. I hope it, I wish it wouldn't be such a factor. I wish it was only about the performance, but it does creep in.
I think
It's like
the,
Pandora's box, right? It's been
Hence
opened.
my question in the first place.
I think the thing that I think the thing that's important to consider with something like that is that music is just ever changing, just like everything else in the world. Like, yeah, production didn't matter when Bo Diddley was playing just because no one had the technology for it to matter whatsoever. No one even knew what good production was at that point. It was just put your thing down on the record and put it out. Like, people will listen to it because they like the riff.
Yeah, but there's a lot of that
as-
old stuff though. Like you listen to like the Jackie Gleason Orchestra and all that stuff was recorded absolutely wonderful. Beautiful productions. You know, it all depends on how much money you had and how, you know, depends. Everything had to line up perfectly. But just to say that they couldn't record anything back in the day is not true. There are some.
Well, it's also the instruments that were being recorded. An electric guitar is a lot harder to record than an acoustic piano or something like that. Just because it's way more feedback. Or like an acoustic guitar. Acoustic guitar is like the easiest instrument to record. If you have like even like a little DI box, or even if you just use a mic, you can get a pretty decent sound out of it. So that's the other thing too, is these electric artists were starting to come out. There's started to be a need for, well, if we want this to sound half decent, we need to put a little more effort into this production now, because we are trying to do more heavy stuff or more intricate stuff. I mean, a lot of jazz stuff was recorded really well, but it's mostly acoustic instruments. Like, it's, you know.
Yeah. I mean, if you listen to Dave Brubeck at Carnegie Hall, I can promise you there's no more than 2 mics on Joe Murillo's drum kit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's so beautiful. It's so gorgeous because, first of all, he knew how to balance his playing from a player's standpoint, because he wasn't relying on somebody with 6 faders because he had 6 mics on his kit to balance him out. He played it naturally. He played it better, and they just sounded better. And somewhere along the line, and this is a topic for another day, the notion that more separation, less noise, more perfection was somehow better. And I don't know when that came about, but it took us down a road that we're still fighting right now. And it has made, I think, a detrimental impact to the quality of our art moving forward.
I've always said that starts with Dark Side of the Moon. To me, ever since I was a kid, I always thought 1973 Dark Side of the Moon, from that point, you can get as good a sound as you can ever need. And then from there on forward, everything is opinion. But you can do whatever you want starting rather, you know, you can't do the new gizmos of the 80s or anything like that, and synthesizers change, blah, blah, blah. But you know, to get as much bass at the bottom, as much treble at the top, and to massage in a few complicated, challenging things like the voice clips and all that, and the stuff they did at the beginning of Money and all that. It's like, to me, that's the first perfect sounding record where everything forward is now opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree 100%.
I would
with
agree.
that.
I just want to suggest one more thing about things changing too. Like, I mean, as the 70s, 80s come in, production changes. We were talking about Pump, how like, oh, would it sound better with the 70s production? Maybe, but would that really be Aerosmith progressing as a band if they sounded exactly like they did 15 years before? I don't know. That might get a little dry after a while. People kind of have to change as time goes on. So like, that's another thing I want to suggest, is that productions change just because I mean, the world changes and like people's perspectives, technology changes, people's abilities change. Sometimes that causes failures that change, but sometimes it also causes success. So, I mean, I think we have to embrace it and just realize not every time it's going to work out perfectly.
Maybe this has been stated, but for me, maybe there's another way to look at it. For me, an over-reliance on production or an overemphasis on production is like the tail wagging the dog. For me, it always should be about the performance. It should all be about the lyrics and what you're trying to convey. And the production could be the icing on the cake or the thing gets you over the finish line, but it shouldn't be the thing that is the most important. That to me is, again, because Ryan just said it, in the 80s, that production was perfect. And now it's cringy when you listen to it. So it's all about that performance.
And to kind of add on to what Nick S was kind of saying, because you brought up guys like Robert Johnson and Bo Diddley, stuff like that. One record came to mind once you mentioned those guys, and this is Howlin' Wolf, Moanin' in the Moonlight. Look at the songwriting on this record. Imagine, or Howlin' Wolf, his voice in general, that rough, raspy voice we all know and love. Imagine that sounding like fucking Madonna
in stereo.
It's right. But
it's got to be appropriate, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, right.
Multi-layered vocals
with a drum machine would just be the icing on the cake.
Right.
Auto-tune in there.
Right.
Oh my god. Yeah.
So,
but I always vision this to be one of the greatest songwritings of all time. And it's definitely one of my favorite blues records of all time, if you would ask me. But like I said before, like imagine Howlin' Wolf with a Madonna production or, a Spice Girls production.
Or a Tony Platt mix.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just wouldn't work. And this is the beauty of it. The performances are great. It's little to no production. And so this is the beauty of it. It sounds like you put this on the turntable, it sounds like Howlin' Wolf is singing right at you. And that's the magic of records like this. It doesn't sound pretty. It sounds like complete ass, but it sounds like it sounds like the acoustics are coming right at you. Howlin' is having his dirty, raspy voice we all know and love. Sounds like it's coming right out of your speaker. That's what I love to hear. But that's just me.
What that Buddy Holly record sounds like.
Right. Exactly.
So I think we've come to like a general consensus here, which is that it's a good metaphor. It's almost like it's like gain staging, right? Unity. You want to get it to that point where you're not losing anything, but when you start to add that extra stuff,
that's could be bad.
The truth of that song.
Absolutely.
So I think we're running out of time here, and I do have to get to work in a few minutes. But let's go around one more time for everybody. That's everyone can give their final thoughts. I did also have a question for everyone. Who here has been in a recording studio and sat through the process of recording? We got one and a half.
I wish.
Okay, so I was curious. Would you guys agree that there's also something to be said about that over search for perfection, where people start to lose that energy? You're in that studio 12 hours, and 8 hours you spent playing that same riff over and over while the guy adjusts the microphone. Like maybe that's something we should have talked about, but I was curious just to see. So anyways, we'll go around and just for those of you at home, it can be a very draining experience, very, very draining. So maybe there's something to why some of those lower production things have that energy to them. But anyways, that's just a random thought. Let's go around one more time. Final message to the folks at home. Plug what you got to plug. Say hi to someone special. Whatever you want to do. We're going around one more time. Let's start with Grant.
Oh boy, Grant's Rock Warehouse. Tomorrow night, we've got the April wine discussion where we're going to be looking at First Glance and Power Play. Bicycle Legs No, that's coming up. That's another day. Bicycle Legs and I are doing a video on Devo where we're going through each album and picking our favorite songs off each record. And Todd Evans is going to be on that one. Reed and I are doing a Beach Boys show on Wednesday. Pylon interview on Friday with Todd Evans. And then Friday Night Chat is on Friday, where our topic will be, I can't remember what the topic is. I don't know, it's first Friday Night Chat on Friday anyway. You people
Awesome.
know the topics. I'm trying to get through it real fast, but this week is jam-packed full of content. But Friday is going to be really cool because we're interviewing Vanessa with Pylon. So that's going to be really, going to be wonderful. Anyway, tune in, subscribe, like, comment.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Grant. And for those of you at home, check out Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Sure.
And thank you for being here, Grant. We appreciate it. You brought some great
It was
thoughts.
fun.
Awesome. Let's go over to Tyler next. New kid on the block. Why don't you tell the folks at home something?
Absolutely. So about less than a month ago, I finally gained the courage to start my own YouTube channel. It's called LP Tremors. So what we basically do is we talk about vinyl, records like this, or records I already pointed out. So all things vinyl, and I'm not sure if you can see Jason right here, but we also talk about horror movies as well. So it's all things vinyl records and horror movies. And when it comes to vinyl, it comes to all different genres. So from metal to hard rock, classic rock, jazz, blues, soul, whatever you want. So that's basically LP Tremors, but just all things records, all things horror. And I just actually, earlier this morning, I released my 4th video called, and I'm starting a new series. It's called, it's Feeling the Monday Blues. So where I pick, where it's all about blues. So every Mondays, I'm going to pick, in basic terms at least, I'm going to pick 3 random blues records out of my collection, review it, discuss it, rate it, and rank it. And yeah, so every Monday we're gonna be talking about blues. It's gonna be much more serious to come, much more other stuff in the works. But yeah, that's basically the whole gist of LP Tremors. Definitely check it out if you're into horror, if you're a vinyl nut like me. And you can also find me on Ryan's channel quite a bit. You can find me on Grant's channel and maybe Contrarians. I don't know.
Well, this is a good start.
Yeah. Keep having opinions like that. You'll be on here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out. We appreciate having you. You had some really good thoughts.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No problem. All right, let's go over to Peter.
Oh, thank you. Again, great to be here. Nice to see everybody. I felt like this was a topic worth kind of throwing out there and see when we kick the tires, what it was going to do. It's got, again, like I said, a lot of branches on this tree, and they can take you in a lot of different directions. Sure. I know as a musician from the opposite side that production is almost as equal, if not more so, than the songs that we're playing. If you don't feel you sound like you, and that's really what this comes down to in a lot of artists' case. This is who I am. This is who I sound. Just make me sound like this on the record. And very, very, very seldomly does that ever happen. There are a lot of hands. There are a lot of sets of ears. There are all lots of things designed to get in the way of how you sound. Many of them are in your own band, how your guitarist wants to sound, how your vocalist needs to be heard. So this is an operation in both physics, mathematics, and musicality. And it is a complicated, but sometimes not so complicated way to deliver art to people. So, the bigger the album, the more money, the more egos, the more hands and things that are getting in the way of that translation from artist to listener. And what happens in between can sometimes be a horrible mess. So if you've got albums that you love, enjoy them, play them, and share them with your friends. And if there's something you don't like the sound of, Martin said you can always tailor it. That's what those little buttons are for. They're called EQs. Use them. Tailor it to yourself. Your ears are yours, not mine, not anybody else's. And if it sounds good to you, it's valid.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Do you have a script for that? You're so eloquent.
No, it's not. Sorry.
He's a professional, for crying out loud.
Yeah, you could tell. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for picking the topic too. This is a great discussion.
Thanks for picking it.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, you're up. Why don't you tell the folks at home where to find you?
All right. So I have a channel called Ryan's Final Destination. We will actually be live streaming an episode in about 20 minutes now for my Aerosmith series. We've been doing this one for like 5 years now, and it's a lot of fun. Probably about 10 more years worth of content too, but the one we're doing tonight is going to be our ideal set list for the band in 1978. Peter, Grant, and Tyler and I are going to all pick 17 songs each that we would like to hear them play. We sequenced them in orders because Live Bootleg was released in 78, had 17 songs on it. So it's just kind of in fun with that after we did the live album episode last week. Other things we have coming up, we have a YouTube series coming up in the 22nd is going to be the first episode at 9 p.m. It'll be live streaming. We'll be talking about the album's Boy in October. What else? We have our Dario Argento episode on the 20th. We'll be talking about his trilogy of films, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Four Flies on Gray Velvet. So his basically like his Hitchcockian mystery movies. That'll be a lot of fun. Let's see what else. I just literally like right before this episode happened, record an episode about cassettes and some that I found recently. So go check that out. I also have a Facebook and Instagram for the channel as well, where I'll share written reviews that I write for myself, and then also for Seed Tranquility, I share those on there as well. And like reels of albums I'm listening to, pictures and write-ups of record stores I go to, etc. So there's a ton of content. And then you can also find me on Grant's channel, Tyler's channel eventually, John Clauser's channel, My Music Corner, Rock Daydream Nation, Rock Fantasy, and then maybe Rush fans in the near future. Be doing another Maiden episode too with them in the near future as well on my channel. Those guys, so all over the place. Just literally go on YouTube and you'll probably find me.
And Ryan and I are going to be doing a Cheap Trick series too.
Yes.
I don't know when that's starting, but we're going to do the first album in color, and we're going to go through the entire catalog. It'll take
Thursday on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
I'm glad that Ryan's keeping everything straight.
Someone has to.
I know it's hard.
So just for the folks at home, this might be released after that's happened, and all these sorts of things. Who knows with timelines? But the general message: go check them out. They got great content. And thanks for being here, Ryan. We appreciate it. Always bring great thoughts to the table. We're gonna do Nick next. Why don't you tell the folks at home something about you?
Something about me. Well, I'm here. I'm on the Contrarians. I that's enough for me. Actually, though, I will say that I've been slugging down the April wine lately, gallons of it. So I'll make an appearance on Grant's channel. I'm looking forward to it because I'm really diving into that April wine, and I love it.
Great band.
Good stuff.
And maybe I'll have an announcement in the future, but I might be appearing, depending on whether tickets are still available, in Hamilton, Ontario this coming September. There's a good chance of that. So it'll be a challenge to the Contrarians, but I'm going to know probably by the end of this week.
Awesome. Well, hey, if you
Speaking in code, of course.
Yeah, when you know, I think I know what you're talking about. So we'll see what happens. And thanks for being here, Nick. Always appreciate it. All right. Last but certainly not least, the man himself, Martin. Why don't you tell the people a little bit about what you got going on right now?
Well, I'm doing a lot of illustrating lately, pencil crayon on black paper. I want to do a medium search, but I'm doing a lot of art, and it's actually taking over from doing anything else. So I literally am trying to throw some hours at a couple of books I still need to do, but I could see doing way more of this because I do these and people throw me band names and then I draw them and they want me to get prints done and I get prints done, and I'm making these little card sets, and you could see the full gallery of these on artpal.com, and then the even fuller gallery of all the imagined ads and the portraits and everything from Flaming Telepaths on my new WordPress site, which is martinpopoff.ca. And then any of the books is at martinpopoff.com. Don't order the Bowie book from me because my 30 that I got are gone, and now they aren't giving me anymore because it's being held back for the release date, which is in September now. So anybody who got any of those 30 like Reed Little, he got one today. That's it. So the Bowie book will be re-available in September, but right now I've got the Yes Visual 2 and all those other ones, and that's all martinpopoff.com. But yeah, it's getting to the point where I could see myself doing more oils and acrylics and trying different medium, but definitely still cranking out all these pencil crayon on black things. And that's taken over from doing too many more books because I got nothing more to write about, nothing more to talk about, nothing more to write about. So I may as well start drawing, right?
Well, I've seen, I saw some of those on Facebook just today, those rush ones you did. Those are really good, man. Really, really good. All right. Well, now to address you, the viewer at home. Thank you so much for watching. We really, really appreciate it. Please support everybody who's on here in any way you can. As you can tell, they all have just an immense amount of knowledge, really interesting perspectives. And, we're trying to start a conversation here. And we'd appreciate it if you help spread that conversation around. That being said, if you like the content, please like and subscribe and share with your friends if you think they're like-minded. We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below as well. You know, you're a contrarian too. If you're watching this, like it or not, you're a contrarian now. But in all seriousness, thank you for watching. There is a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Patreon also gets you access to chats like this if you want to try your hand at being a on-screen contrarian. We'd love to have you. There's also a Ko-fi if you want to do a one-time support. I'm not sure how that works, but I'm sure Marco will have detailed instructions for you. There's also a TeePublic if you want to get some t-shirts. We're making a little bit of merch. And yeah, but the most important thing, like I said, is that you're here, you're watching. If you liked it, please give a like. And if you want more, please subscribe. But want to thank all of our panelists again for being here. Thank you so much. This was a great discussion, a really interesting topic. And I want to thank you at home for watching. Yes, you, Phil. There you go. If there's any Phils watching, you got a special shout out. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. And we'll be back at it again soon. And yeah, just everyone have themselves a great night, morning, day, whatever it is. Thanks.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. We'll see you
Night.
later.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. See ya.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.